Hi ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Rod Fleming here. I hope that you're all well. We could do with being an awful lot better. We still have a major financial crisis and it is actually beginning to affect our relationships, so I'll keep you posted. Anyway, please, if you can, please contribute a little bit to any one of the sites that I will give you details for, which include Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, Ko-Fi, and there's a cryptocurrency thing, and there's also a GoFundMe, which has stalled completely and after reaching only half of its intended top-out value. So please, I'm just about to put the addresses up. Please help. We really need it. Huge appreciation to those who have already helped. I really do appreciate it. I know that people are stuck for money just now. It's not an easy time for anyone. So the fact that people are prepared to put their hands in their pockets, it really touches me. On with the show, as they say. So last week I was asked to comment on the subject of homosexual behaviour in animals. Right? Now, that is something that I was tempted to write a short response to in line, and then I thought, that's really a dangerous thing to do, because this is actually a massively complicated question. The problem is that homosexual behaviour in animals requires that you define what homosexual behaviour is. Now, the gay lobby, that is, the gay LGBT lobby in the West, has tried for many years to suggest the fact that you do get same-sex activity in animals. It's quite well documented that this actually relates to homosexuality in humans. And this is an extremely long leap, not one that can easily be proven. The only animal in which long-term sexual bonding between the same sex, in this case males, has been observed is domestic sheep. That's the only animal that does it. And these are not wild sheep, these are domestic sheep. We don't know if wild sheep do it, but we can be sure that it has never been observed in wild sheep. So essentially the only animals that actually do this homosexual thing, which is where same-sex partners bond in exactly the same way as they would normally bond with an opposite-sex partner and develop lifelong romantic and sexual relationships, it doesn't happen. It simply does not happen in the animal world. And yes, I know that the fans of Julia Serrano will immediately be running for their pitchforks and burning brands, but sorry, that woman's a liar, a barefaced liar, and her collection of so-called homosexual animals is just nonsense. And I'll tell you how it's nonsense. I'm a country boy, as many of you will know, and I was raised around animals and I worked for a long time with stock. In fact, I am actually a qualified stockman and a dairy herdsman. You may not appreciate that, but hey, there it goes. And I appreciate, yes, my qualifications are many years out of date now, but never mind. I did actually do the courses, and I did work for a long time with animals. Now, any stockman will tell you that if you take a heifer, or a female, a cow, past male cattle, and on a farm these days, these are usually bullocks, so they've actually been castrated. Nevertheless, as soon as they smell her, they will start to mount each other. And it actually can get quite dangerous, because these are big animals, and they get kind of passionate. And if you were in the pen with them, then you might well get trampled to death, quite honestly, because it can be quite spectacular. And people who've seen it for the first time are like, what on earth is going on? And it's just that they're triggered by the pheromones being released by the heifer, the cow, who is in estrus. This is a cow who's emitting scent signals that tell males that she's ready to be mounted. She's got an egg, that she's ovulated, and she's ready to have her egg fertilized. So come on, boys. That's basically what happens. And that kind of behavior is seen in many animals. Now, we're not going to discuss too much non-mammals, because things like lizards and insects are a bit interesting, but there's still no evidence of any long-term bonding between two same-sex individuals in these groups. The most, the closest relatives we have are actually called dwarf chimpanzees, or bonobos, which are panpeniscus is the Latin name. And they're actually a little bit closer related to us than the common chimpanzee, which is Pan troglodytes, in case you want to know it. And they're far less aggressive in every way. They are much cooler. They are actually very cool apes, you know, and they have a huge amount of sex. They have sex all the time. But it's actually very difficult to see where the lines between masturbation, mutual masturbation, and sex start and finish. You know, for example, bonobo females will apparently indulge in a kind of fake coitus where they will rub genitals together, sometimes for as long as an hour, and they obviously enjoy it. They've been observed to be making squealing noises and grimaces, which scientists suggest might possibly have something to do with orgasms. And yes, we all know that they do have something to do with orgasms. And people have asked, well, why do bonobos do this? Because actually, there's no bonding involved. This is kind of like matish activity. It's kind of like things that pals do. And the theory that has been most commonly expressed, and it's been discussed widely, is that this is kind of like lubricates bonobo society. It's one of the things that diminishes the tension within the group and allows it to move forward, or to coexist in a much more peaceable way. Now, if you know anything about the great apes, apes like chimpanzees and many others, you know, are extremely aggressive animals. Don't run away with the ideas that these are cuddly wee monkeys. They're not. They are, baboons particularly, are extremely vicious and very dangerous. Male common chimpanzees, for example, it's Pan troglodytes, they normally have a mating situation, where only one male actually mates, and he mates with all the females of the group. And when a new male becomes dominant, defeats the old pack leader, he will normally kill all of the existing young chimpanzees, the babies, because they're not his. And he wants to replace them with his own offspring. Now, this does not happen in bonobo society. And the theorizing is that because bonobo society is less aggressive, less violent, and more relaxed, it's not because it's more feminine, but it appears to be that the social contact, which is inherent in having intimate sexual play with each other, actually makes it more difficult to be violent towards each other. And that's extremely possible. You know, that's a very plausible argument that has been put forward by many others. Now, by many researchers. Baboons, I'll just touch on baboons. Baboons are notoriously violent, very unpleasant animals. And they behave in exactly the same way. They will happily kill all of the offspring of another male once a new dominant male takes over the clan. And clans here in these groups are dominated by a single male. The beta males, we'll use wolfpack analogy, and remember that means that you have one alpha male, and then you have lots of beta males. Now, these beta males are not the weaklings, right? They are actually very aggressive males themselves. They're just not quite as aggressive as the alpha. But if anything happened to the alpha, one of them would take over. One of them would beat the others and take over. The weakling males, the ones who are really never going to get anything at all in the way of sex, they're actually called omega males. So, again, this is indicative of a very aggressive social culture. Now, some humans, noticeably feminists, are very fond of suggesting that humans' society is extremely violent and aggressive and da-di-da-di-da-di-da, which actually it isn't. It's not. If you were to look at and compare it directly to other animal societies, and yes, that you could definitely use most of the great apes as very good examples of this. Human society is extremely tame and very cooperative. Humans don't, by and large, go around killing the other male's babies. Doesn't happen. There's a really very well-established systems within all human societies which protect the females and the children. There is no rape culture. There is no rape culture within human society on the planet. Yet, if you were to look at chimpanzee culture, it's based on rape culture. The same is true of baboon culture. They don't expect, acquiescence. They don't expect to get told, yes, it's all right, dear. Yes, I quite fancy a little bit. Let's just go and find a nice little quiet little hollow to do it in. They just go and rape the females they want, and it's as simple as that. That's rape culture. It doesn't happen in humans. There is no human population where rape culture exists. In fact, all human populations, certainly the ones that I know of, have really strict and often deadly punishments for rape. In some cultures, it's punishable by death. In many older cultures, that was normal. If you raped a woman, then you're going to die. That was the punishment. So you simply cannot say that there is a rape culture extant there. That's as absurd as anything feminism ever said, and it has said plenty of absurd things. So the whole thing about, I'm going to have to read a little bit here, the whole thing about same-sex shenanigans, the whole thing about same-sex really arose from a very, very dubious book by a man called Bagamill, who wrote in 1999 a book that suggested that there was this widespread existence of homosexuality amongst animals, and it had only not been seen or only not reported because most people are heterosexual and they're kind of not really interested in homosexuality, so they don't talk about it, which is the typical LGB argument, and it's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Most researchers into homosexuality, or into sexuality generally, are not gay. I don't know if you knew that, but they're not. Within birds, long-term bonding is normal, and an example that's always brought up is a bird called the Lasian albatross. Now, it has been observed that the Lasian albatross females will often pair bonds between each other. And what will happen is that they will have sex with male albatrosses. They're not really not homosexual. They'll have sex with male albatrosses in order to get to conceive, and then they will bring the young up with this other female. And the albatrosses that they have this sex with are normally mated. They're already in a pair bond with another female. So it basically is a guy cheating, right? So these females will use those guys cheating and they will get conceived, raise their eggs together, raise their young together. Now, they're not as good at raising a brood of young as a male-female pair are. And we know this statistically. They just aren't. Sorry, girls. But they are much better in pairs at raising the brood than single females are. So this looks, evolutionary to me. It looks like what's happening here is that where there aren't enough males, and that's characteristic of this population, there are far fewer males than females. We don't know why. What will happen is that in order to bring up the next generation, and successfully, some females will pair bond and bring up young that way. And this works within the context of being a Lasian albatross, which we are not, by the way. Now, all of this nonsense has been chuntering along for a long time, and as I say, it's pushed by the gay lobby, by the LGBT lobby. They want this to be true. They want to say, well, all the animals on the planet are gay, so it's just normal. That's the way you're normal. It's a normal thing. It isn't. It's very, very, very unusual. And as far as we can see, the only animal that does it, with the exception of those sheep we were talking about, and even they're a little bit, you ought to be careful with that one, are humans. We're the only people that do it. And this was confirmed by a neurologist, a very famous neurologist called Dr. Simon Levy, who studied this sort of thing in depth. And he was able to, looking at the sheep, he was able to discern that there were differences in the structure of the brains of the sheep who did this, right? And he said This is very similar to the kind of differences we see in between the brains of gay and straight men. And so there is that example. There is an example there, but it's only one species, and it's only in the domesticated version of that species. And so we don't really know what is causing it. Simon Levy, Dr. Simon Levy, in his studies, he comes up with some comments on the fact that he has discovered that this does exist. You know, there's about 10% of sheep, male sheep, who prefer to be with other male sheep, and they have sex together, they do everything together, they bond in a apparently completely normal way, exactly as a male and female sheep might bond, and they do this for life. And he suggests that maybe there's something else going on. He suggests that there is some epigenetic thing going on, or there is a situation where a gene has two effects. You know, a gene is helping along the survival of the offspring in one element, in one of its functions. In the other, it's encouraging this behavior. We don't actually know. And the point, however, to answer my questioner last week is, no, there's no gay, there's homosexual behavior, that is same-sex behavior, but there's no gay animals. They don't exist. Gay is a lifestyle, a way of living, a whole thing that is entirely and uniquely human. And in a way we should be proud of it, because it is part of being human. It's a mark of humanity. Something that other animals just don't do. Anyway, that's that. Thank you.